From Bravery Media, this is Thought Feeder. My name is Joel Goodman. With me, as always, is the equitable John Steven Stansel, and we are super, super excited to have Adrienne Sheares with us today. Adrienne is the owner of Vivier Labs and is a genius consultant, basically, from all of the stuff I've been reading the last few weeks. Just a brilliant social media consultant that has tons of insight. And Adrienne, we are super excited to talk to you today. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for that introduction. I need you guys to come with me whenever I go to like pitches or meetings, so people put some respect on my name of she's a genius. So love that intro.
It always helps to have hype folk around you, right? So we were tasked with kind of focusing this around TikTok because you've been writing and talking and I would assume consulting around TikTok for a while, and have done some really interesting focus group studies and have all this. I wouldn't say that it's like new data, but it's probably data that not everyone has really heard about or has really been thinking about. And so first, I thought like maybe we could just start with, like, for me, I'm not very good at TikTok. Like JS is started developing his own TikTok style. I'm the TikTok user that has friends that just send me things that they're like, hey, I saw this baker doing bread. Do you want to look at this bread video? And then I watch a bread video, and it's great. And I love that. But I don't think I use TikTok to its full potential. And the point of this conversation today is to talk about how we're seeing the younger generations, Gen Z and younger, starting to use TikTok in ways that us, to be honest, old people, maybe haven't thought to use TikTok before. So can you kind of give us like your thoughts on the lay of the land of that platform? And then we can kind of dive in. Like, what do you see as really valuable with TikTok in the modern day?
So I think what people need to understand is TikTok is an inspiration app. It's a place where you can go, like you were saying, what are you doing? Oh, I'll make some bread. How do I do that? TikTok rolled out, I don't know if you guys saw this new commercial series with Tony Hawk. He's not allowed to do extreme skateboarding anymore. So the doctor is like, you can't do this anymore. It's a little x-ray. And so he has to find either, I think it was like a non-extreme sport. And so you see him kind of going through TikTok to get an idea of what his new sport is going to be. And I think it was some with a beanbag. I don't remember the name of the sport, and he's having a great time with it. So people are using it. Me, for example, I'm not a large TikTok user. I love Twitter. But when I was going to South Africa, I used the app to get inspiration of things to do. And so when I did my Generation Z mini focus group study, that's how they were using it as well. They were wondering, where can I go to brunch? I want to see the different rooftops in New York. And the things that really inspired them to try it was really the vibes in the video. So any brand or higher education, you want to spark inspiration to students, prospective students. That's where your content is. And so one way we see colleges doing that, I think it was USC, for example, they were asking the students as they went by of what they were wearing. They're in California, so clearly wardrobe and different style is going to be important for that school or people who are attending there. I think merging into more higher ed of what is the vibe of your school? People make decisions on education clearly for, am I going to get a job afterwards, or what are the courses? But let's be honest, you don't spend most of your time, at least if you're a traditional full-time undergrad student, in a classroom. So what the culture is like is going to be really important to those students. And I remember being in high school and just dreaming of what college would be like. And now, thanks to TikTok, you can kind of see, what are the dorms going to be? What is the food? What are the games like? What are the professors like? What is the quad like? And so schools can really tap into this by really showing what's unique about them.
I think that's an excellent point. And there's so much untapped potential there. And the question I have, especially, I'm really eager to hear more about this, because you held a focus group, which so many schools just don't do. We just assume there's somebody that says, "Oh, I saw on 60 Minutes that the kids are on TikTok, and Andy Rooney, oh, rest his soul, or whoever they have now." That's how old I am. I remember Andy Rooney. I was upset about it. But they don't really have the data always to back it up. So do you think, from your research with the focus group, that Gen Z we can all agree they're actively using TikTok, but are they using it to research potential schools?
So that is a good question. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure, because the focus group that I interviewed, they were already either in college or had just recently graduated. So they were a little before the look of looking for schools. However, over 50% of 18 to 20-year-olds are using TikTok. And interesting enough, 26% of 18 to 29-year-olds, and this is according to Pew, they're actually getting their news from TikTok. So I don't think it's without, I think it would be a safe bet to assume they are using it. I noticed since I've been to college, like when I was in college, Facebook was the thing. When I'm talking to different students, I do notice, so it had been Instagram that I was noticing that they were kind of trying to get a vibe of what their schools were like. So I think with the progression of TikTok, it would be understandable that they would be turning to that platform.
Oh, for sure. And so they're not getting their news from 60 Minutes. We can.
Well, I will say the focus group that I interviewed, they were not getting their news from TikTok. I think, well, one of them was, but majority of them had realized that maybe getting news was not a good idea. But there is the trend among Gen Z and other adults like Gen X, millennials, are starting to turn more to TikTok for news, not as prevalently as Gen Z. And that's Pew. I think it came out like a couple months ago. So that was actually a little interesting. And since doing the focus group, the funny thing is now people come up to me unprompted to tell me what they use TikTok to search for. And so I'm getting everything from, what Google had found. They had found Gen Z is using it for, finding a restaurant or looking up a destination. But I had friends like, yeah, my stomach hurt, so I went to TikTok to see what was wrong. And I'm just like, that is not what you're supposed to be doing. But they're like, it's great. It's easy. It's fun. I see a nice, happy doctor who's telling me, and they're like, great.
It's the new
cured.
WebMD.
So.
Yeah. Well, my TikTok heavy friends, I guess that's the way to say it. My friends that use TikTok heavily, that are my own age, are in their mid to late 30s, are very much using TikTok in a very similar way. And so I think we're like starting to see it trickle up too, where my friends are currently working on a kitchen here in Louisville, Kentucky. They've been renovating the kitchen. My friend Stacy jumps on TikTok and is just like you were talking about it being an inspiration app. Like, she's going in not only to figure out oh, how do I install a cabinet, or whatever her task is, but she's also looking for that inspiration side of it. And it's interesting to me that I think your original focus group was kind of at least a little bit kicked off by a TechCrunch article, if I'm right, that talked about Google was real scared that that TikTok is taking over their search ownership, I guess, their stake there. It's just such an interesting shift.
Yeah, so it actually worked out perfectly, because I had got the idea before the article came out, because I was talking to one of my former interns, and I had heard rumblings on Twitter of this, and I had kind of bookmarked it to be like, is this really a thing? But, things are busy. And so I'm having a conversation with her about fashion, and she's like, oh, that hasn't come across my TikTok. And I'm like, what is what I'm saying? have to do with TikTok? She's like, oh, I use TikTok to find outfits, to go on a trip, and all these things. And so I was like, oh my gosh, do like more people like you do this? And she was like, yes. So I had asked her, I said, could we get a focus group going? And as we're getting that together, the TechCrunch article came, and I'm like, okay, this really is a thing. This isn't just you and your friends. So the timing actually worked out beautifully.
That's amazing. I mean, like, I love it when that kind of like you have that idea and you start working on it, and then like the mainstream media starts like actually talking about it. Like, hopefully, gave you a little bit of lift in just reach online.
I think it definitely did, for sure.
So I don't know how much you pay attention to social media marketing in the higher ed space, because that's relatively niche, I suppose. But I wouldn't say that many colleges and universities are super progressive with how they tend to market, or at least like when they're marketing, it's a lot more of that news and events oriented or like general brand messaging sort of thing. And to some extent, I think like TikTok has that. But like, what ways do you think universities could approach developing a better TikTok strategy, keeping in mind that it is sort of this inspiration platform, and it is this way for users to kind of get more of a feeling for the space and the place and the activities and all the really cool stuff? Like, what are like the keys to success that a university or a college could start thinking through in developing that strategy?
Oh, awesome. And then funny enough, I actually did do a little bit of higher ed marketing. I wrote a white paper on how colleges and universities can use social media to attract students. This was before TikTok. But what I will say, I had taken a look before, coming on here today, and I was really interested to see some universities that you thought would just be on TikTok and killing it were not. And I think it could be due to higher education; they're spread very thin. And so for that, looking at user generated content, what the students are talking about, and seeing if you could form some type of partnership or ambassador program, because they're already creating content. I noticed regardless if the school was doing it, the students were doing it. And I think it's important for the colleges and universities to note, it's a buzzword, but it's true. TikTok is a lot about authenticity. People can see multiple perspectives of an event, of a hashtag. So if we're talking about your food, your mascot, or what have you, whatever's popular at your school, searching that hashtag, I'm going to see multiple accounts, and it's not just going to be the brand account. And then actually, we see this outside of higher ed. Generally, the most popular content is not coming from the brand. It is coming from either, in this case, the students, or the fans, or what have you. But what I would say for colleges and universities, start gearing up to be there. And the way that you're going to have to do that is probably allowing budget, which I think John could speak more to, because I don't understand how that works. But I'll just talk from maybe the tactical part of what to do. But what I did notice, though, is some of the schools were doing it in a very creative way. And so my first tip would really be look at what other schools are doing, but not just what other schools are doing, what other brands are doing. So for example, a really popular thing is a day in the life. And so I had noticed that some colleges were doing day in a life of the students, which is great for prospective students, but also from alumni. So for example, like Baylor had a newscaster that's an alumna, and she did, what is it like being a morning newscaster? And so I thought, this is great, because like from a career perspective, I remember being in high school really wanting to be a journalist. So that's the type of content that really would have resonated with me. Then there's just thinking of the culture of TikTok. People come to TikTok to have a good time and laugh. So how can you do that? So for example, one school that I saw, I believe it was University of Kentucky, they had a kind of like a joke of when your professor comes in and immediately gives an assignment on the first day of school. And I think it was like a little clip of like what happened to saying hello, what happened to saying how are you. So it's kind of like just a little loop and like a girl kind of like doing like little facial expressions. And it was like funny because everyone remembers there was that professor that, either had the first day of class was really nice and easy and we're all getting to know each other. And the other professor's like, we're diving in. And this is like, we're really in school. And you're just like, whoa, we just got out of break. Like, why are we doing all this?
I was that professor. You can start hard and get easy. You can't start easy and get hard as a teacher. So like my first day, I was like really strict, and then I would just get, okay, I'm a little more laid back. But I think you bring up some really great points there, and there's a few things I really want to address because I know there's got to be a couple listeners in our audience right now that are asking themselves this question, and I don't have an answer for it, and I'm sure and it's okay if you don't, other than just like put your arms up in frustration. But just yesterday, we got a new governor here in Arkansas who signed her first acts was to sign an executive order banning TikTok from state-owned devices. So if you work at a state institution in Arkansas, and many other states are passing similar legislation, you cannot use TikTok on a state-run device. I guess you could get around it by doing it your personal or hiring an agency to it. The law still has some gray areas. If you could pay an agency for ads, I don't know the ins and outs of it. It's going to vary from state to state. But I think you do bring up a good point that the bulk of the content that students find is not from the school, but from other individuals. And maybe we could hire influencers or get alumni to post on our behalves. But what other alternatives? What would you say to a university who's really now hampered? They've got a major social media platform that is a tool for communication that they can no longer use. What can they do?
So I think you ironed it out perfectly. There's no easy solution, right? Because does the social media manager now need to use their personal phone? I will say, I've had to in my career, but putting that pressure on someone is a lot. I did like what you said about the creators and having someone do it on your behalf. I think that's something that came up in it did come up in the focus group of the Gen Z participants were quite frank in saying they trusted creators more than brands, even if the creators were getting paid, as long as what they were promoting or what type of content they were creating was aligned with the creator's brand. So they would say, okay, you're getting paid, but it's authentic. I could believe you use this. I could believe you support this. And as I said, the creator's reach and trust is probably far greater. They understand the platform. And I think it's a great way to maybe find a loophole to get around. But then the challenge you have is your official account. How do you repost? I guess you have to repost from a personal account. So I think you're just going to have to get a little ugly, to be frank. I don't see a way around because what I hadn't thought about when that law, has been passing in different places is the state-owned universities, because you're right, that technically then is a state device.
Yeah, politics aside, and like I just think it's a terribly short-sighted law. Like we can all agree, okay, maybe a state auditor doesn't need to have TikTok on their personal or their state-owned device, but like marketers, it is a marketing tool, and the state has public information officers, PR people, all of these other professionals, and on top of that, a lot of them ours, I believe, has a law enforcement loophole where they can log in and see like, okay, there's a video, we might need to monitor threats or other things, but also, I think it hampers universities as far as social listening goes, and seeing what's being said about their institution on social media. So I think social media managers at state institutions have just been put into a really tough position of these new laws.
They really have. And with the social listening component, that made me think of another point on you can't be on TikTok as a brand or a university and not respond. I had noticed when I was looking at some accounts, they're posting about happy holidays, fun stuff. But in the background, or in real life, if you will, the school was going through some controversy. They had incidents with students and police and, violence with students. And people are like, did you expel so and so yet? Why is this here? Why have we not addressed this? So the thing about TikTok is it can't fix or cover up anything that's really happening in real life. If you're having problems with, students, or there's disarray, it's going to come out regardless if address it on TikTok or not. So you might as well, have a plan put together of, you don't need to respond to every single comment if you're getting like thousands and thousands, but seeing, I personally didn't know what the incident was at the school. So I Googled it, and then I was like, oh my God, like, why aren't they saying anything about this? And it's just all the comments like, expel this girl, expel. And I'm like, who is this girl? What does she do? And I'm like, oh man, they should have expelled her. So the thing about it is, if someone had, just put a thing like, we're addressing this and blah, 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 and the president will be making a speech at noon, check it out. I'm sure there'll still be people, commenting, but at least as a prospective student, as a maybe potential donor, or, what have you, I could be like, okay, things happen, but it's being addressed. Exactly.
And I think that kind of goes down to the idea, and I say this about any social platform, whether or not you're on TikTok, you're on TikTok. Like, somebody's filming at your school, somebody's talking about your school. And if you're not able to control or respond to that message, you're letting that group control the message. So I worry. I'm glad I'm no longer at a state-funded higher ed institution right now and have to deal with it. But I feel so much, and not just higher ed. There's government accounts that do really good work on TikTok that are in danger there. So if any lawmakers are listening, which I sincerely doubt, like, it might be time to like make some amendments to those laws.
Yeah, or have some certain protections put in place on the phone so that, I mean, I don't know, this is beyond my reach, but I'm just saying, like, maybe it's a special TikTok phone, or it's a, VPNs in order. I don't know.
Let's address some of the ideas that they can do. Like, there are a lot of students who have large followings, who are TikTok influencers, or may even be like professional TikTokers. I mean, I'm sure at least every campus has one, right? So how can schools ethically leverage those students who have a large following on TikTok? What's a good way to work with them in a way that isn't just, hey, would you make us a video for free?
Yeah. That's a good question that I would kind of thinking about. So my former intern, her name is Jayla. One thing I noticed in her college experience, she was a student ambassador for many, many brands, from Bumble to Victoria's Secret to, they're just endless. Like, she had like 8 of them. And you have to create content for the brands. And I believe they pay you in swags. It was, some of them I was looking like, but, she got, really great experience. And so my thought would be, there's a couple of options. One, starting a student ambassador program. So that either could be, maybe it's associated with a course. So if there's like a large university and we're doing a social media course, and you can apply to be a student ambassador, so it's like homework and credit, so you're not just doing for free. Then of course, what would be great is you're actually paid, like a work study or internship, for the schools that have more of a budget, to do this, some of that should go to actual creator, or for especially the ones who get it, paying them like you would pay any creator. So whatever their rates are. Because to your point, there are students who are making money being creators. One of my friends had me cracking up because she has her own, social media agency. And she was talking about her younger colleagues, and, they're walking and the girl gets in a Tesla, and she's like, how you got this Tesla? Like, I don't pay you that much. And she's like, oh, I have deals with brands. She's a creator on the side. And so she's like, can you teach me your ways? Because you work for me and you're living this good life and I'm perplexed. So I think there's a few different ways to do it, because I will give these students credit. Like, that type of way to make money wasn't really available when I was in college. I remember, a few people had blogs, but you just did that for fun. Like, there was nobody, making money. So I think not taking advantage of the students is key. I think, working out how you're going to use generated content, asking first, don't just take it. And if you're going to be using it in an advertisement, then there needs to be a larger conversation, because now you're getting into what is the rights, what is the licensing, how long can you use this content. So I think having a good understanding of how to leverage your students without taking advantage of them. Because one thing about Generation Z, well, you do this because it's the right thing to do, but also Generation Z is pretty savvy. And so in the focus group, they were talking about they would never support a brand that takes advantage of creators. They don't like it when brands steal from a popular creator and don't give credit, or just take and maybe give credit but didn't ask. So really making sure you're on your P's and Q's there.
That's good advice everywhere, especially for higher ed. Like, that is the cardinal sin in higher ed is plagiarism, right? So, I'm curious about this focus group. Was there anything that just stood out and surprised you that you learned from the focus group?
So I have to go back in time, because now I have adapted. I've become more well-versed in TikTok and, looking for things. I think the very first thing that surprised me is they just thought it was more efficient way to find things. I think that was the first thing that was like, because when I first heard the trend, as other people, I'm just like, what is more efficient than looking at something in Google? But as they were talking to me about it, they're like, look, I go on Google. It's kind of the same results. It's a lot of advertising. I'm going through pages and pages of results, versus when I go on TikTok, I know in the first few seconds if this is what I want or not. So I can just keep swiping and I'm entertained as I go. So I think that was the thing that was most baffling to me. And they also thought us not getting it was baffling to them. But they said many times, they grew up on YouTube. So getting information in video form is not a foreign concept to them.
Yeah, it seems completely wild to me. Like, that would not be, the first place I would look for information. But I mean, times change, and there are different methods and ways to do it. And there are some just really incredible creators on TikTok putting out amazing content that is reliable. But I worry about media literacy, like reliable sources. But we've always have, like, since Wikipedia. I remember back when I was teaching, it was never use Wikipedia. Now it's like, yeah, but check the references and sources.
Yeah, I wish I could find. I think I was reading this morning. I don't remember if it was Sweden or Norway. I'm gonna have to look it up. But they had incorporated online literacy into their education system so that kids can spot misinformation or disinformation, whatever they were calling it. I think it's going to be critical for the social networks and search engines to really evolve. I know they don't have to evolve at this time as far as misinformation, because they're like, look, we just pull up what exists. But I'm thinking from when I was a kid, when I was looking for information, most of it was credible sources, right? I had to go to an encyclopedia. I had to go to a library. And so a lot of like misinformation that would never make the cut didn't get published. Not saying everything is perfect, but you could reliably trust this information. And the internet has changed that. And to think that people are going, if you just want an answer to something, you just want the answer. So you're like, oh, this came up, sounds good, great. And expecting people to triple check, how many times do we go to a party and we're like, who won the Oscar in 2005? Like, we're not going to go and search everything. We're going to take the first answer that pops up. So I think there's going to have to be some type of stamp or some type of algorithm, and I don't know, maybe with AI can, fact check and promote things that are more credible than others. I'm really not sure what the answer is going to be, but something's going to have to be done because as we've seen with trials of like Megan the Stallion, there's so many people who did not realize that the blogs were just making things up and several other cases. And it's just like once it's out there, put a little graphic on it, people are like, oh, this blah, blah. And even my own husband, we're at the dinner table. He's like, oh, I could have swore I read this. I'm like, yeah, that wasn't true. And he's like, oh, man. Now, imagine he's been to college. He's a reasonable man. But your mind, once you're sorting through all this information, you don't like compartmentalize like, oh, that was fake. That was not. It just all comes back in your memory.
Well, and all those algorithms today, so different from even 10 years ago, where today it's about elevating that content that's going to make the most amount of money for the platform. It's not about truth. It's not about facts. It never is. It's about engagement. It's about selling advertising. And, that's where we see, all the problems that started cropping up on Twitter and that are, somewhat back with its new ownership. But, the amplification of misinformation is not necessarily because someone is evil and trying to push their political agenda. It's because someone's evil and is trying to make as much money as they can off of the platform that they have. Maybe not that they're evil, but and that is a problem because, as you were saying, like with your husband, it's like, even for people that do have those media literacy backgrounds or the filters in place, and like I'm one of them. I have a master's degree in media studies, and media literacy was one of the things I really focused on in my studies. But I still have to catch myself making sure that I'm critically analyzing stuff that's coming across in search results on social media. Mostly just because you get into mental routines, right? And so like the systems are designed to build trust, and the algorithms are designed to build trust with you, whether that's a good thing or not. And it's a dangerous place to be in the modern world when we don't have those media literacy education programs set in our public schools, set in general curriculum. You don't really get any of that till college, maybe. And actually, generally, you don't get that stuff till college. You got to go do a master's degree with a specialization in it to really start thinking about it or seeking out those media literacy tools at the same time. It's a scary thing.
I wonder though, and we'll move on past this and get back to TikTok in a second, but if the younger generation's more of a trial by fire where like, we grew up with reliable sources of information. You get the evening news, Dan Rather says it's got to be true. It's published in Time magazine, whatnot. But this sort of trial by fire is pushing the younger generation to more skepticism, which I hope, because I also sometimes I feel like the younger generation has better media literacy than like my parents or grandparents.
Oh, definitely.
who just assume you made a video. It's a video. It has to be true. You took the time to make this, right? So I do think, we worry a lot about the younger generations, but they might actually be better at it than we think.
I think it depends on who. So for the focus group that I did, they were very aware that misinformation was rampant on TikTok. And so the way they protected themselves was just assuming, unless said otherwise, that the information that they were coming across on TikTok was no good. And what I mean by that, like for as far as news or politics or health is concerned. And they also said they didn't necessarily care if the information was true or not, pending on the situation. So if they're just wanting to be entertained, they're like, it doesn't matter. I'm just having a good time. Now, if they're going to now buy something or go somewhere, now they're going to start doing their due diligence off of TikTok. Well, we'll start with TikTok with seeing how many followers the person has, what are their comments, what are the other content, and then seeing what other people are saying about it, and then, going further and further into their rabbit hole until they've determined they have enough information to be like, okay, I think this is credible. And the focus group, they talked a lot about, they viewed Google and Twitter. This is before Elon Musk had took over and changed some things, but they viewed Twitter as credible. And I think they were really citing the election of when Twitter had the, oh, this is not true, or, whatever. And they said they wished more platforms would have that. And they spoke a lot about being burned by TikTok, meaning in the beginning, like, I guess 2020 pandemic, they had followed some people who were, I guess, health experts. So like that. And, this one woman in the focus group was like, I followed them, I believed them, this. And then it came out that the person was a fraud. So after that, she was like pretty upset. And so she's like, I'm no longer trusting any of these health experts on TikTok. If there's something, I'm going to go to another credible source. So I would say with this group, they were very understanding of the problem with misinformation and had taken different steps on, making sure they weren't, I guess, a victim to it.
Yeah, it's definitely a problem for sure. And hopefully, one, I do think better media literacy courses are the solution. But also, yeah, our students are smart. They might get burnt once. You've got to touch the stove every now and, once in your life, and like get burned and you never touch it again. Who among us has not accidentally shared disinformation? It happens to everybody. Something we all have to be vigilant for. Back to the practical usage of TikTok, the fun stuff. You mentioned at Content Marketing World that you enjoy several brands on TikTok. Have you seen any schools on the platform that you think are doing a particularly good job, or are just other brands in general that you think are doing well?
Yeah, so I would say I took a little gander. So I went and saw like Howard University. I think they're building up their TikTok. They didn't have like as many followers as some of the big schools, but I loved what they were doing for homecoming, kind of showcasing their culture and the band and the uniqueness of Howard. I really enjoyed USC. I think they were, really embraced the Florida. I mean, not Florida. Sorry, the California. I'm literally just coming back from break. And Clemson University, they were kind of, they really played up, the football. And I guess, I'm not a big football fan, but the Tiger, they had like the Tiger in different, like for winter break, they were doing, the Tigers by the Fire and reading like a holiday book, and they're playing like holiday music. So getting people in the spirit. And I would suggest people check out Rival IQ. They are I guess, software company. You could look at, competitive data on social networks, and they actually have a higher ed study where they're looking at the colleges and universities, and they rank them by their engagements on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And this is the first year that they're doing TikTok. And the thing that I also wanted to point out, because I know, John, this speaks highly to you, of being great at all social networks is very, very hard. And the thing that this study uncovered is the top 10, most engaging, like, let's say Instagram accounts on higher education. This top 10 is not the same for TikTok. So they change with each school. So I think one thing I really liked, I don't remember, unfortunately, which colleges these were, so they kind of all ran together. But I really liked, I think I mentioned, like, what are you wearing? And I really liked some schools, like I think it was a Texas school, they're showing like their Greek fraternities and sorority life and really putting it together. And I think Harvard had like I don't know if you guys saw, like on Vogue, for example, they asked celebrities like 70 questions or 71 or I don't know, a certain amount of questions. So they were asking the dean of Harvard as he's walking around campus, 21 questions, really bringing into the spirit of TikTok. And I think another interesting one, and unfortunately I don't remember the school, they were giving tips to the students and I think things that are relevant to today's students. So for example, there were tips on going home for the holidays if you're a member of the LGBTQIA. And it was advice on, what to do if someone, picks a fight with you at dinner. So it wasn't necessarily just academics. A lot of these accounts mixed in with, I guess, the Gen Z culture, or, Gen Z students, or what they cared about. So Black Panther was another big one. Of a lot of the schools, I guess, had partnerships or something going on with Black Panther. And so we're seeing behind the scenes of the kids getting a preview, or some people are saying what, Black Panther meant to them, and they're also inserting like their major. They're like, as a music major, and the songs, and, all that great stuff. So really capturing what is going on with the students, and what's going on with your campus, and what's going on with the uniqueness in your culture. I think some people were emphasizing, I think it was USC again, how awesome their, graduation is. And I believe they had Oprah as a keynote. And so, repurposing Oprah's speech, which I think was their most watched video, because hello, Oprah, I've seen her speak before, and it is, you immediately want to make your life better after hearing her speak. So I think a lot of the schools have come up with creative ways on how to do things. Another cool thing that I saw was a before and after picture. So if you've ever been on a college tour when schools aren't in session, it looks dead, right? So they're talking about coming back from the break, and they said before, so the campus is empty. It's kind of like a few people milling around. Then it's after the students are back, you're seeing like the vibrancy of the campus. And it's just a really quick, like, I don't even think the video was 15 seconds, but it was paired to some cool music. So that's another thing that's important. Of popular music choices can help, I guess, your video perform. So I'm seeing different colleges using different popular tactics that work for brands on TikTok. I think the main thing for colleges to be aware of why people are coming to TikTok. They're coming to be inspired. They're coming to laugh. They're coming for an authentic experience. So having something that's just purely academic 24/7 is not going to work. And I would say similar things that have probably worked on your Instagram of showcasing your uniqueness and vibrancy will also work on TikTok. You just have to, make sure it fits with the platform.
I can't think of a better bow to like wrap this episode up on. Like, I've got so many more questions, but like, that's just a wonderful note to end on. This really sums it up very well. So that said, Adrienne, where can people find you, read more about your focus group, plug anything that you see fit?
Okay. Well, hello, everyone. I'm Adrienne. You can find me on Sheares. You probably would like to follow me on Twitter and LinkedIn, since those are where I am the most. I do have a TikTok, but it is really for researching and seeing other things and planning my trip. So I have not posted to TikTok as of yet, but now that my hair is done, maybe I'll make a little video today. And you can go to my website, adriensheares.com. I'll be having some more changes of having, revamping my blog and having a LinkedIn Live series. But if you go to my website and subscribe, you can get all those details because they're forthcoming.
Thank you so much for listening to the Thought Feeder podcast. And again, a very special thanks to Adrienne for being with us today. Thank you so much, Adrienne.
Thank you for having me.
You can find Adrienne on Twitter at Adrienne Sheares. We'll also have that linked up in the show notes on our website at thoughtfeederpod.com. You can also find back episodes and transcripts for every episode that we've done there. You can also follow us on social media. We're sort of on Twitter at ThoughtFeedPod still, but, pending whatever, if Twitter burns down, are we still there? Who knows? We are definitely on LinkedIn. We've got a nascent Instagram happening. All of that is at ThoughtFeedPod. And there's plenty more content coming out. Thought Feeder is produced and edited by Carl Grashit and hosted by John Steven Stansel and me, Joel Goodman. If you are a fan of the show and are feeling generous, we really would appreciate a review and a rating on specifically Apple Podcasts. But if wherever you get your podcasts supports that sort of a thing, please leave a comment and a review, and that'll really help other folks find the show. We'll be back with another episode in a couple of weeks.